Hello, and thank you all so much for joining us today. Today, we are blessed and honored to have Ron Lerma with LGE Consulting once again joining us to present on alignment, aligning the story and the narrative specifically. Ron, you've presented to us in the past, and as many of you know, Ron has had a very successful career in sales, improving and growing businesses as a consultant in SMB marketplace. He has a very strong background of success and contribution to the business community. Ron, if I went over all of your accomplishments here, the introduction would be over 24 hours straight. But before I turn it over to you here, I do want to quickly take a moment to thank our sponsors, Axiva, Job Formats with their proprietary Job Fit Report, Merchant Masters, and McGraw Capital Partners. Without them, our mission would not be fulfilled. So thank you to each and every one of those individual entities. And with that, Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us what you got.
Well, John, thank you so much for allowing me to speak once again. Let me just jump right into it. And so here we go. I'm going to share my screen. All right, let's get going. So as I said, thank you. Happy to be here. And yes, the sales business has certainly changed. But to provide context, there's a few glaring...
Real quick, Ron,
yes, sir.
Can you pull up the presentation for us?
Yeah, I think it's already up right now.
We're not seeing it on our end.
Let me see. Let's try one more time.
You want to click share and then share screen. Bear with us as we get over these technical difficulties. We have this up for you in just a moment. There we go. Now we see your presentation.
Perfect. How's that?
That's much better. Thank you.
Nicely done. All right. So as I was saying, I wanted to provide some context to, there's a few glaring realities that we can't get away from relating to sales. First, COVID has changed everything. It's changed our routines, our storylines, our procedures, our habits. And secondly, interestingly, according to the Alderman Trust Barometer, which is a research consultancy who they survey about 34,000 respondents, and they say that trust is at an all-time low. And no institution has seen both competent and ethical. So this research is problematic for professional salespeople because, we're all in the business of delivering truthful information. And when it's not trusted, this makes our sales job so much harder. So our stories matter, and our story alignments are even more scrutinized because of fake news, blog opinions, online noise, and politics. So that, there are plenty of good sales training organizations out there. And I've discovered if you commit to one method of selling, it most likely will work. However, we do run the risk of hitching our wagon to the wrong method, and we'll waste a lot of time and resources if we do that. So my hope today is to provide a new perspective in making sales decisions. And to do that, we'll discuss some sales alignments and how strategy plays this role. And we'll also, I hope to better understand what a narrative might be and what it means in our sales storytelling. So we all have some degree of sales pressure. And when we receive, price pressure, we typically lower the price. And this results in lower margins, earning less money and dissatisfactions. And A lot of organizations feel the need to do something, but without good strategy, they end up doing a lot of sales fire drills when actually digging a little bit deeper into the root causes, would be a bit wiser. So strategy is always more important than selling. But often, we get focused on the revenue, the cash flows, and our customers, and we spend a lot of time at looking at our story strategy, aimed at bigger, better, and bigger deals. So to illustrate this point, I want to role play a coffee story. John and I have been practicing this, so let's see how it goes. So, John, you're going to be the seller, and I'm the buyer. And so, as you can see, the buyer's plot, no slave labor, no chemicals, and it has to be tasty. And on your side, of course, no slaves and no chemicals, and it has to taste really well. So let's do a story. So, John, go ahead.
So if I'm trying to pitch my coffee to you, Ron, at John Beeman's coffee shop, we'll call it, I'm going to make the pitch something like this. I want to let you know first and foremost that our coffee is great coffee. It comes with it has zero involvement in any type of child or slave labor. We have verification through various agencies that we don't partake in any of that. We ensure that our coffee is 100% natural and it has great flavor. You can actually take a look at our verifications on our website. You can take a look at our ingredients so you yourself can see there are no chemicals. And then, of course, we have great reviews. So it's obviously very flavorful.
Good. So as a buyer, I'm charged with, I really need to know that your coffee is made with no slave labor, not taking advantage of the people, but actually helping them. And our customers, they don't want any chemicals in their coffee. So I need to be certain that there's not that. And it also has to taste good. So let's unpack this story just a little bit. So discussing narrative and story is like discussing the differences between like what is a need and what is a want. So the more it's discussed, the more confusing it can become. So using the structure of a house, better explains the framework of a story. So narrative is the framework having a beginning, a middle, but it doesn't have an end. So it's always changing. So this means your surroundings, the characters, the particular details, the conditions, and the current environment, it changes the landscape of your story message. So to illustrate this point, let me tell you a story. So there was a boy, his name is Ankara. He lives in the jungles high in Thailand, and he has 10 siblings and a mother and a father. So they have they're a typical farming family. They live a happy life. They go to school. They have a garden. They have work to do. And they also have an elephant. His name is Joe. So Joe the elephant, his job is to harvest wood from the forest. Well, and he goes in the forest and he drags lumber to the lumber yard. So Joe the elephant is also known to be naughty. So he eats the garden vegetables. He's been caught eating buckets of harvested coffee beans. Well, one day, Ankara and his older brother get in a fight. Ankara, being the smaller one, loses the battle. So in response to this beating, Ankara took a handful of elephant poop, boiled it in water, and gave it to his brother. His brother thanked Ankara for the coffee. He really liked it, so much so he shared it with the rest of his family, and surprisingly, they liked it too. So the family, they found out how the elephant poop was made. They had an idea. They took it to the tourist spot, and they sold it to the tourists. The tourists liked it too. Today, the elephant poop coffee is called Black Ivy Coffee Company. It costs $500 per pound. So that's $50 a cup. So what a story. So is this story true or is this story false? John, what do you say?
This story is actually true.
It is indeed. It is indeed true. So let's break this down a little bit. If the narrative is the frame, so what are the framing components supporting the story? So the jungles of Thailand to begin with, Ankara and his family, Joe the elephant. You have a conflict, which is the fight. You have the poop response, of course. And then you have the innovation, which is the coffee. And then you get the sale.
So then, Ron, would it be fair to say that good things can come from a crappy situation?
And you're being kind. I think there's other ways of saying that, right? So I totally agree with you. So in other words, why this black coffee exists is because one naughty elephant ate coffee beans.
Ron, if you don't mind, Ron, can I give an example of a conflicting narrative and story?
Yes, sure.
So if and you please correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, but as one example, during the COVID lockdowns, one of the common narratives that we heard, especially from certain elected officials, was that you absolutely have to be safe. Stay at home, don't travel, wear the mask, don't gather in quote large gatherings. Literally within a matter of weeks or months following that narrative, that statement, you would see certain elected officials out there and they're traveling, they're in large gatherings, they're outside of their homes, and many times they were outside of their state or even out of the country. And what happens is the story that they created by their actions didn't align with their narrative, and the end result was that they lost massive credibility. Fair assessment?
Absolutely. In fact, we live in a culture now that unfortunately truth telling is a lost art, and we need to get that back. And as it relates to selling and storytelling is spot on. So yeah, everything you mentioned is indeed happening, and we can probably open this up to larger discussion, because I think every salesperson out there will have their story. So yeah, so it's interesting when I consult in this space. I often speak to owners and sales managers who struggle with onboarding some of their new salespeople, and they spend a lot of time onboarding how the company operates, all the sales procedures, but they never spend enough time embedding the company story into their salespeople. And often this leads to lackluster results. It costs a lot of money to onboard somebody. When you have a bad hire, it's just expensive. So this is why storytelling at your company, it's really important to understand the narrative and how the story connects to the sales strategy. What's important is the flow of emotion. With a better understanding of your story, you can better respond to your customers. So this tool you see in front of you, it's a great tool. I can't take credit for it. A colleague at Stanford who worked at Pixar shared this tool with us, and it captures the emotion in their animations. So stories can move us to action, and in recent studies, people are moved more by stories than by true data. So even if the data is confirmed and tested and it's true, they'll still respond by how their emotion will take them. So stories really matter.
And I think that's part of the whole, if I can quick jump in here, kind of
Sure.
translating it to like the, your small business owner, what does this mean on a, frontline practical level? As you're telling that story, you're building the emotional state of your prospect or customer. And when they're at peak emotional high or peak emotional low, when they're on those opposite ends of the spectrum, they're more likely to take action on something. And that's where, again, the story needs to fit with the narrative, because if that's not aligned, the solution you're trying to provide isn't going to make sense to them. It's not going to match the narrative. It's not going to produce the right emotion. Whereas when they're in alignment, the customer or prospect will be in that peak emotional stage, and then your solution will match everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. On the flip side of this, it's the dark side of selling, right? Where one can take advantage of your negative emotion. And so we as sales professionals, the more we understand about the science and the psychology of selling, the more we can smell a rat and say, hey, wait a second, this is not sounding right. So the more sciences and high-level information we could obtain to build into our storytelling, the better we'll be. But here's another interesting thing here. So we live in a 6G environment. And so this means that 6 generations are living at one time. So this has never happened before. So it's a challenge for most of us. And if you're part of the traditionalist generation and want to remain relevant, we better understand social media and how important it is. And if you're a millennial, it's probably important to understand how to engage a baby boomer since they have most of the money. And if you're a Generation Z, it's probably important to understand the GI generation since your inheritance is most likely in your hands, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I found that the best teams have learned how to tap into the wisdom of the older generation, the older business folk. And at the same time, these older executives, they learn how to trust their new workforce, in mobilizing some digital transformations. So in the selling business, one of our challenges is how do we speak to these 6 generations all at the same time?
I think that, I mean, this is something, again, if you don't mind me jumping in here, Ron.
No, absolutely. Go ahead.
I think this is, again, one of those challenges. I mean, you mentioned a minute ago, we've never had a period in American history where we have 6 generations like this, very active in the business environment as consumers, as business owners, so on and so forth. Yes, it's easier now than it ever has been to really, start a business, but realize it's also become more complex to run it. You have to know, and again, this is where alignment is so critical. You have to know which story to tell to each generation because there are going to be different components that resonate with them. And that's where it goes back to knowing your customer journey map, know who you're targeting, know who you're really trying to reach with your various marketing efforts, because each of these generations is going to have a different preferred method of communication, a different set of values, a different set of preferences, and you have to incorporate that into your narrative, into your story, and into your overall marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a personal epiphany here. When I was doing sales training, some of the I'll use the baby boomers in this. They had an attitude of, "Hey, that Generation Z, they should be doing what I say because I'm the older one." And there's a group of people who are like, "No, we're not going to change you, baby boomer. We're going to do it our way." What I found is that we, the baby boomers, the traditionalists, they have to change. They have to be able to see this new generation. It's interesting that no other generation can mobilize so quickly around the world, almost instantaneously. So it would behoove us, the older generation, to recognize that mobilization effort. And as we begin to tell our stories, to gain more market share, to earn more money, to begin to change, society by selling our products and services, it would benefit us to get in that spot of lifelong learning in order to help Generation Z, the millennials, Generation Xers, and so forth and so on. So one of the things we're thinking of as we're looking at these stories and creating a series. In the next series, I'll have the privilege of showing you how to actually execute some of these stories. So some homework. So if you can collect your stories, there's typically in storytelling in business, there's 3 areas. There's the founder story, there's the worker story, and then there's the user story. These stories all have different narratives and they all have different, connector points. So I would challenge you to spend some time, asking the owners asking yourself, what is my story? And what story are you giving to your workers to tell? And once that's done, what story are your users receiving? And is it alignment with your overall objectives?
And I think that's a really good one, Ron, where the rubber meets the road. I know there are a lot of people out there who are watching this who are unfamiliar with this methodology. Could you run through a brief example of each of these stories so we get a better idea of what it looks like in practice application?
Yeah, sure. So the founder story is typically, for example, I consult with one organization They're about 100 years old. They have a great story of how they had to, fight through generational wars, how the family, kept together, how they iterated, how they innovated to stay in business. And then when they hired their workers, this story of longevity, of security, saying, we've been here for a while, we can actually do this. And these current problems, we're going to get through them just as we got through them before. What ends up happening is the user feels much more secure doing business with you because you have a long history, as opposed to, hey, I'm a startup, do business with me. So as we begin to unfold and unwrap these stories, you'll find the connector points. So to answer your question, John, there's much more science involved, which the 3 series, at the end of the 3 series, you'll have a better understanding of how to connect your stories.
Fantastic. And what were you going to say, Ron?
Well, in true to form, I wanted to share with your users, this information I'm sharing with you is not just my own thinking. so I have to cite, the information where I get this. So the Elderman Trust Barometer, great information about who's trusting who. Black Ivy Coffee Company, take a peek. Creative Cave is an organization from our colleague at Stanford who worked at Pixar, and also Think Inc. is a great consultancy regarding negotiation. And of course, there's LGE Consulting, which is our organization. Let's see, John, that'll be the end of my presentation. Let me stop the share.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ron, for taking time out of your schedule to present to us today. And we deliberately, as we were going through this, we deliberately kept this one more condensed. Ron, I know we talked in the past, this can literally be a multi-day seminar event type of thing. And it's a lot of information. It's a lot of science that goes into it, but we wanted to condense it down as much as possible to where the small business, the HVAC owner, the mom and pop restaurant owner could take a look at this, understand it, and apply it into their business in a timely fashion. As you mentioned, this is the first of a 3-part series. So this the focus of today is alignment. Make sure that your stories align with your narrative. And the part, the homework that you mentioned, small business owners need to go back and write down, not just conceptualize in their heads, write down their founder story, write down their worker story, and write down their user story. And in a perfect world, those are all going to be in alignment. However, if they're not, that's where you need to take action to fix wherever the process broke. But please, Ron, tell us, what are the next 2 series?
Yeah, so the execution series is really interesting because you can do a lot of upfront homework, but if you have poor execution, this is where you get lackluster results. So the executable pieces, what are you saying? And more importantly, who are you telling your story to? So often we're so excited about our story and we're telling to any and everybody who they're not in alignment with our go-to-market strategy, but hey, we have a story to tell. So we want to, on the execution part, we'll spend a lot of time focusing on who you're telling your story to and how you actually say it. Another thing is your story is always evolving as it relates to who you're speaking to. You have the freedom to actually tell the story in different ways. So it's not so rigid. It's interesting. My 4 kids, each time I tell them a different story, I have to tell it differently because hey, I didn't get that. Oh, okay, I'll tell it again. Your sister didn't get it. Your brother might get it this way. I found the same thing with storytelling. So we want to arm your salespeople with the freedom to tell the story as they own it, then they're able to sell it. They'll be able to dig into, is the story that I'm selling, do I actually believe it?
And does
really
it
hard?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's really hard to sell something when you're like, you know what, I just don't believe this.
For sure, and it has to align with the theme of the company, the narrative of the company. It has to align with the vision. Because if you're out, if someone sets up a restaurant, wants to deliver, a premier experience, the people they hire are just, I'm just here to make a buck. That's not in alignment. That's going to produce some very conflicting stories for your reviews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then on the last series of results, measuring your results is really important. Lackluster results is really easy. Most organizations can open their doors and just by chance someone's going to walk in and say, "Hey, what do you do here?" "I serve tacos." "Great, I'll buy one." That's not a strategy. That's kind of luck.
There's no process to it.
No, we want exponential growth. And right now, with the current business environment, you have tremendous opportunity to make a change, tremendous opportunity to take advantage of a situation where organizations are trying to reboot because of COVID. They're trying to figure out their next steps. So they're looking for the subject matter experts in your organizations to trust, to move forward. The storytelling gets you in the door, but you want the best result. So alignment, execution, and results. Those three things will get you to the next step.
Y'all stay tuned. We're going to be creating that Facebook event and scheduling it over the next couple of weeks. So we will let you know when that is officially on the calendar. We have to coordinate with LGE and make sure we fit within their schedule because they have a lot going on. But Ron, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on that. And we are super excited for the next part of the series.
Happy to help.
Stay safe, stay blessed, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.